Ever had someone try to control your family even after they're gone? This story will make your blood boil and then just maybe make you cheer. Because when these entitled relatives tried to force a family to move their loved one's body, they never expected karma to hit them like a freight train. Let's dive in. In May of 2024, my wife's sister, Sarah, and her fiancé, Heath, got married. They'd been together for 8 years, and in that time, Heath had become the father Sarah's daughter, Kate, had always deserved. A few weeks after the wedding, he formally adopted Kate. Heath was the kind of man who you couldn't help but love. Funny, genuine, hard-working, always the first to offer help, always the last one to leave a party because he stayed to clean up. He always looked for an excuse to get the family together, to fire up his grills and break out the bourbon. The last time he did it was his 50th birthday. A month later, almost the day, he suffered a massive heart attack and died. I stood with him as groomsman, as did our younger brother-in-law, and a good friend of Heath's. 6 months later, in the same church, we were his pallbearers. To say our family was, and still is, devastated is an understatement. Our side of the family is a close-knit bunch. We tend to drop the in-law title. My brothers-in-law are my brothers. My wife's sisters are my sisters. And their parents see the three of us as their sons. We genuinely look forward to spending time with one another. And when Heath came on the scene, he quickly became the heart of the family. To both celebrate and mourn the same person in equal fashion in such a short time span was nothing any of us expected, and something I frankly wouldn't wish on anyone. Heath was meticulous in a lot of ways, but the only plan he didn't have in place was where he wanted to be buried. A few weeks before he passed, he and our mother-in-law, Jackie, talked about final plans, just conversation. No one knew anything was wrong at the time. She had mentioned wanting to be buried in a family plot with her grandparents and her parents. She said that after she and my father-in-law, Mitch, passed, there would be 2 to 4 spaces available as most of her cousins had made other arrangements. He said he liked the thought of resting beside them. Cut to November 2024. Heath was gone. Plans had to be made quickly, and space was available. He died on a Saturday. We buried him the following Friday. On Monday, Jackie received a phone call from one of her cousins, Bertha. Not to offer condolences, but to ask, "How could you bury that stranger next to Grandma?" The conversation was mostly one-sided. Bertha went on and on about how wrong it was that this man was buried next to their grandmother, that she'd visited the town hall to see what could be done. Jackie's only response was, "Bertha, he was my son. We just buried him. We didn't know what else to do." Mitch told us he'd never seen her so angry in 45-plus years of marriage. They decided it best not to tell Sarah just yet. She didn't need the stress on top of mourning. A few days passed. Jackie got a call from Charlotte, another cousin's wife. Charlotte went on to tell Jackie that Bertha and her sister had obtained a lawyer and were going to attempt to sue Sarah for Heath's removal. It was at this point that Mitch and Jackie decided to go to Sarah and Kate's house and tell them what was going on. Sarah was understandably angry, confused, and hurt. She owned the plot that Heath was buried in and the plot beside it. So legally she was fine. But beyond that, how can someone who calls themselves family do this? One of the last people to hear the news was my wife. Not because they didn't want to know, but because she's a firm believer in going full scorched earth when someone screws with the people she loves. They wanted advice. There needs to be a bit of context added for the next part. Before Jackie's grandparents died, they set aside a 12-plot space in the local cemetery to accommodate the needs of their kids and grandkids, a good bit of forward thinking, as Jackie's mother was one of 5 daughters. As fate would have it, the only one of 5 daughters who was buried there was Jackie's mother, in addition to her father and her cousin. So, of the 12 plots, only 5 were in use at the time. Each of the 5 sisters also inherited a bit of farmland, and each built houses close by. Their children, Jackie and Bertha's generation, grew up close to each other, and so a few of them stuck around and built homes to raise their children as well, my wife and Sarah's generation. Jackie and her brother inherited some land from their mother, which they rented out to be farmed. Next to it is Bertha and her twin sister's land. Both are accessed by the same path. The only access to Bertha's land, by the way, Roadside access is owned by the state. The path itself is owned entirely by Jackie and her brother. I'll spare the details of my wife's reaction. But suffice it to say, at the end of the conversation, she had suggested moving Heath, moving her grandparents, and establishing a family cemetery elsewhere. If they want it, they can fucking choke on it, was what my wife said. This wasn't contrition, it was a fuck you, and my in-laws approved. The legality of it all, and realized a little later, was that the majority of the remaining plots would become entirely unusable. Moving Heath and Jackie's parents would create 3 empty plots. Sarah's plot would be a 4th. Mitch and Jackie's would make 6 spaces total, all owned by our family. This means out of the original 12, there would be only 3 empty plots left not owned by us. In the interim, another family member passed and was buried there. 2 unclaimed plots of 12 with 6 sitting empty and can't be used. To some, that would be enough. To my wife, a woman who thinks burning bridges give off a lovely glow, this was only the appetizer to a meal that will take years to finish. More on that in a moment. We set aside space on the family's farmland to lay Heath and Jackie's parents to rest back in January of this year. It's quiet there, set against tall pines with open fields leading up to it. It's a good spot, and with plenty of room for those of us who want it to be our place of rest. The only issue is that the path to access it is pretty far away. At my wife's suggestion, when planting season starts, Jackie and her brother will ask the people who rent the land to disc over the path and establish a new one closer to the cemetery. By the way, as mentioned above, this is the only access to Bertha's land. We haven't told her, and we're not planning on it. The whole frontage of her land is covered in trees. Hopefully she finds out before the folks who farm it show up to start planning for the season. For all her disgusting behavior, though, some I left out because this is already pretty long. Bertha is a highly respected medical educator in the community. She's known to just about every nurse in the county. Hell, she was my wife's nursing instructor in college. Thing is, my wife is also well established and highly respected in the community, and she's made sure that word is getting out about Bertha's behavior. It's a slow trickle, but that's often what wears stone down the best. Water is patient like that. Might take a little bit, but once it's done, you can't unchange what people know about you. Edit 2. My wife made a comment in this post that Bertha would have to prove malicious intent, and several folks have pointed out that this post could be proof as such. She's asked me to relay this where it's more visible, and I quote, "To clarify, she had to prove that my mother and uncle's intent was malicious. Mine is no question, but I don't have legal dog in this fight, so to speak. I simply came up with the idea, and then pointed out it'd be an excellent fuck you, while also solving a few different problems. The decisions ultimately lay in the hands of my mother and uncle, who are the property owners. My uncle consulted City Hall about the legalities of the exhumation, and he spoke to a lawyer about the legalities regarding the farmland, which is how we know we still have to allow her access to the easement, which runs along the front of the property. And if she wanted to come at me for slander, she has to prove anything I'm saying is untrue. I have a feeling she's not going to push back too hard because, since we're digging up skeletons, I know several of hers that she wouldn't want uncovered. Now, if you thought that was a nightmare, let me introduce you to my actual neighbor from hell. Let's call her Bertha. And trust me, you'll want to stick around for this one. We finally closed on selling our home the other week. I'd like to just share some grievances that I've had with the direct across-the-street neighbors. Thankfully, as far as I'm aware, they didn't contribute to the hassles of selling, but I was worried they would. For almost 8 years, I dealt with this man and his lady friend, wife, girlfriend. Unsure as she wasn't there at the start, his daughter was, feeding cats outdoors. Long list of grievances living within city limits of an NC town. I will start by saying I love cats and pretty much any animal. However, I do not believe in outdoor/feral/barn cats. Cats are a blight on our environment. Look at the dwindling bird population, toxoplasmosis in monk seals, and so much more. Shouldn't be allowed outdoors unsupervised. The same as dogs, leashed or contained in some way. There's no reason to let your cat out unattended, as it's not safe. No matter where you are, there are always dangers. I had cats growing up on a mini farm, and would now if my husband wasn't mildly allergic. This asshole fed cats from his front porch. Anywhere from 5 to 20 throughout the years showed up. He provided no water, no shelter, no veterinary care. Only fed them one, maybe 2 times a day from paper/foam/takeout trays or plates. Said plates would blow around in the wind on his left/right neighbors. Occasionally into the street or my yard too. Only after 5 years of me calling animal control and a 100F summer with no rain did he provide meager storage totes with straw for shelter. Still no water. Only 2, mind you, that I could see for the horde he cares for. Most cats I only saw 2 or 3 years before they became pancakes on the road. Disappeared entirely. Neighbors next to him poisoned them, or other people's dogs got them. Many people in the area had much bigger, bulky breed mixes. Hounds, labs, or huskies. In 2020, he stopped feeding them completely for a few weeks to months, as he was a cook at a local restaurant, I believe, and wasn't working. The cats harass the neighborhood for food, even I my chickens. And before anyone claims they keep mice away, we got mice once. They are terrible hunters compared to a pack of terriers. He has indoor-only cats that get rides in a stroller and let out, but are supervised sometimes by a leash. Not every time, but sometimes. They are also of the pretty variety, unlike the feral/strays he feeds. More than once has he kept kittens from litters that were pretty like a Siamese pointed-looking one, but not the tabbies, black tuxedo, or plain gray ones. Only one was spayed/neutered, and she was ancient. The rest probably not, as there were kittens every year. At least 3 litters each time that I can recall. Some I managed to catch and turn over to rehabilitation, 2 times whole litters. One only a kitten, as he was abandoned by his mother for whatever reason. Another time I rescued them from drowning and fostered them till a patient at my job took them both in. 90% of them didn't make it to adulthood, except the ones I rescued. The same reasons the adults didn't last long. My doors, 2 front and 1 back, constantly reeked of piss, especially the front doors. Cat shit in front lawn, unburied, in my garden beds. Just everywhere except the driveway, my porch and the garden beds. I put pea gravel in. When it rained, it reactivated the piss. So bad, I had to scrub the interior/exterior of the doors and air out my house because it was so bad. It smelled like they had piss inside. That's how strong it was. My dogs got fleas 3 separate times from them. I treat my yard for fleas/ticks instead of my dogs unless needed, since they aren't outside unattended, and it was only 1/3 of an acre anyway. I'm still surprised they never got worms, as they'd eat any shit pile they could find nauseated face. To make things worse, my county ordinance changed to allow community cat laws last year. But by their logic, these cats didn't apply, as they were not under care. The property owner denied feeding them on many occasions. They were not spayed/neutered. They weren't vaccinated for rabies or anything else. Yet the animal control did nothing to fix the growing issue prior to this change, or afterwards. I found out last year there were 2 other colonies less than a mile away. I'm sure his cats helped feed those in numbers, and vice versa. No clue who was feeding them. Could have been anyone. At one point, to avoid animal control harping on him last year, he tried to use the abandoned property next to me as a feeding station. I never saw who was dumping food, but I suspected it was them, as they were real secretive all of a sudden with feeding them compared to before. I tossed it all into the trash or off into the dirt each day I found it. After a week, they got the hint and resumed feeding them on their own property. I also let the abandoned property owners know, as when someone was living there, I don't believe they liked the cats either. My dogs, of course, got scratched and actually attacked more than once. They never killed one, as any encounter the cats always got away. Thankfully, no major vet bills, but it was close since it was her eye last time. Both dogs are herding breeds, so they were chasing them off. If they wanted grab/shake, they had plenty of opportunities with as many times as they were in my backyard. I could call them off, but because of where the house was situated, sometimes you'd come around the corner and see one chilling. It goes without saying the cats were not friendly. I had a 300-gallon pond I had to enclose because they killed several of my goldfish, fancy oranda types. Found them scratched on death's door several times. One such fish was worth well over $100, and I'm still mad about it. It was protected from egrets getting to them by design, and I had cameras set up, so I know it was the cats and not another predator, along with him claiming to not feed or care for them to animal control. He did feed them. He used a pellet gun or regular gun to defend them from dogs on his porch more than once. Shot at birds of prey over them, buzzards coming to the smell of rancid food on his porch. He also used it to chase off rescue groups who were wanting to at least spay/neuter them for free. Several people over the years have tried to talk to them about the cats, especially now that they look sickly. I didn't bother after I saw him pull out a gun over them, so I'm glad to be done. We liked the house. Neighborhood was okay. Needed speed bumps in my opinion, LOL. But I will not miss that asshole. Hopefully his toxo brain self gets priced out of the neighborhood since he's owned it since the 80s. Fuck him and may Lumpy Space Princess, my goldfish's name, rest in peace. Edited to add, while moving the last of our things out, I also noticed he switched our trash cans. We had both newer trash/recycling cans, and now, all of a sudden, we had an older style green one with a busted lid for trash. I don't care honestly, because it's for garbage, but like how petty do you have to be to swap trash cans with a neighbor when they aren't home for weeks, selling their home? I know it was him because guess who had a Newark and all of a sudden? As much as I bitched, I've never said more than 8 words to him since the day we moved in. So, what do you think? Did the entitled relatives deserve to lose everything? And have you ever dealt with a neighbor as bad as Bertha? Let me know in the comments, because let's be real, we've all got a crazy neighbor story. And hey, if you enjoyed these tales of revenge, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more insane Reddit stories. See you in the next one.